What happens when a beloved television icon walks into what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find himself facing the most humiliating ambush of his career? Tonight we're diving deep into the shocking confrontation that left William Shatner storming off Jimmy Kimmel's stage, and trust me, what you're about to hear will change how you see late-night television forever. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story gets absolutely wild. The green room at Jimmy Kimmel Live was unusually quiet that Tuesday evening. William Shatner sat in his chair, adjusting his tie and running through his mental notes about the new documentary he was there to promote. At 83, the legendary actor had done thousands of interviews, from Carson to Letterman to Conan, and he knew the drill. Tonight was supposed to be simple, a friendly chat about his latest project exploring the final frontier of aging in Hollywood. His publicist, Sarah, poked her head through the door. 5 minutes, Bill. You ready for this? Shatner nodded, that familiar confidence radiating from him. Born ready, as always. But something felt different tonight. The usual pre-show energy seemed charged with an undercurrent he couldn't quite place. The production assistants were whispering more than usual, their glances lingering on him just a beat too long. When the stage manager came to escort him, there was something in her smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Shatner, we're so excited to have you tonight," she said, leading him through the maze of cameras and cables. "Jimmy's really looking forward to this conversation." The studio audience erupted as his name was announced, and Shatner felt that familiar surge of warmth. These were his people, fans who had followed his journey from the bridge of the Enterprise to the stages of Broadway and beyond. He waved, flashed that iconic smile, and settled into the guest chair across from Jimmy Kimmel. Kimmel's opening was standard fare, the usual pleasantries about Shatner's legendary career, a few jokes about boldly going where no man has gone before. The audience laughed in all the right places, and Shatner found himself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of late-night banter. "So, Bill, you've been in this business for what, 60 years now?" Kimmel asked, leaning back in his chair with what looked like genuine interest. "Something like that," Shatner replied. "Though who's counting, right?" "Well, that's actually what I want to talk about tonight," Kimmel said, and something in his tone shifted. The smile remained, but there was a sharpness behind it now that made Shatner's instincts prickle. "Because you've had quite a journey, haven't you? Ups and downs, highs and lows." Shatner nodded cautiously. "Every career has its moments." "Oh, absolutely," Kimmel agreed, reaching for a stack of papers on his desk. "But some moments are more interesting than others, aren't they? Some moments really show us who a person is when they think nobody's watching." The audience had gone quiet now, sensing the shift in energy. Shatner felt his shoulders tense slightly, but he maintained his composure. This was still manageable, still within the bounds of normal interview territory. "Jimmy, I'm not sure what you're getting at," Shatner said, his voice measured but carrying a warning undertone that anyone who knew him would recognize. Kimmel's smile widened, and there was something predatory about it now. "Oh, I think you do, Bill. See, we've done some digging, and we've found some really fascinating stories about your time on various sets over the years. Stories that I think our audience would find very enlightening." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Shatner's publicist, watching from the wings, felt her stomach clench as she recognized the setup. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was an ambush, and her client was walking straight into it. "Stories?" Shatner repeated, his voice taking on that distinctive cadence that fans knew meant he was either about to deliver an iconic line or tear someone apart. "What kind of stories?" "Well, let's start with Star Trek," Kimmel said, consulting his papers with theatrical casualness. "Now, we all love Captain Kirk, but apparently the man behind the captain wasn't always so heroic, was he? I've got some interesting accounts here about how you treated your fellow cast members." Shatner's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think you should be very careful about what you're suggesting, Jimmy." "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything," Kimmel replied, his voice dripping with false innocence. "I'm just sharing what people have said. Like how you allegedly hogged the spotlight, demanded script changes to give yourself more screen time, made life difficult for actors who dared to have their own moments." The studio had gone completely silent now, the audience sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't playful ribbing or gentle roasting. This was character assassination disguised as entertainment. Shatner leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked on Kimmel's face. "Those are serious accusations you're making there, host. I hope you have something to back them up." "Oh, I've got plenty," Kimmel said, clearly enjoying himself now. "Should we talk about the Boston legal years? Or maybe some of your more recent projects? Because the stories just keep coming, Bill, and they all paint a pretty consistent picture of someone who's maybe not as charming behind the scenes as he is in front of the camera." That's when William Shatner realized exactly what was happening. Here. This wasn't an interview gone wrong. This was a planned execution, a deliberate attempt to humiliate him in front of millions of viewers. And Jimmy Kimmel was savoring every second of it. The legendary actor's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles going white as he fought to maintain control. But anyone who knew William Shatner knew that when pushed, he didn't retreat. The studio lights felt hotter now, bearing down on both men as the tension reached a breaking point. Shatner's eyes had gone cold. That famous intensity that had made Captain Kirk so compelling now focused entirely on his host like a phaser set. "To kill. You know what, Jimmy?" Shatner said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the audience. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, and I've dealt with plenty of people like you. People who think they can build themselves up by tearing others down." Kimmel's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning full force. "Oh, come on, Bill. Don't be so sensitive. We're just having a conversation here. Surely, a man of your, shall we say, experience can handle a few tough questions." "Tough questions?" Shatner's voice rose slightly and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Is that what you call this pathetic attempt at tabloid journalism? You invite me here under false pretenses, then try to ambush me with unsubstantiated gossip and rumors?" "Unsubstantiated?" Kimmel laughed, but there was nervousness creeping in now. "Bill, these are direct quotes from people who worked with you, your own colleagues. Colleagues who apparently lack the courage to say these things to my face." Shatner shot back, rising slightly in his chair. "Hidden behind anonymous sources and second-hand stories. If you have something to say about my character, Jimmy, then say it. Don't hide behind other people's alleged words." The host glanced quickly at his producer in the wings, clearly not expecting this level of pushback. His research team had assured him that Shatner would be caught off guard, maybe get a little flustered, provide some entertaining television. They hadn't prepared him for this level of controlled fury. "Look, Bill, I'm just trying to give our audience the full picture," Kimmel said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "You're here promoting yourself as this beloved figure, but there are other sides to the story." "Other sides?" Shatner stood up now, his full presence commanding the stage. "You want to talk about other sides? Let's talk about the side where I've spent 60 years dedicated to my craft, working 18-hour days, pushing myself, and yes, sometimes pushing others to achieve excellence. Let's talk about the side where I've raised millions for charity, supported countless causes, mentored young actors." The audience was completely captivated now, witnessing a masterclass in controlled anger. This wasn't an old man losing his temper. This was a lion defending his territory with calculated precision. "But those things don't make for good television, do they, Jimmy?" Shatner continued, taking a step closer to the desk. "They don't get the clicks, don't generate the buzz. So you resort to this cheap-shot journalism that wouldn't be worthy of a high school newspaper." Kimmel's composure was cracking now, his usual smug confidence replaced by something approaching panic. "Bill, I think you're overreacting here. This is just normal interview stuff. Every celebrity deals with this. Normal? Shatner's voice boomed through the studio. You think it's normal to invite someone to your show under the pretense of promoting their work, then spend the entire time trying to destroy their reputation? You think it's normal to ambush an 83-year-old man with character assassination disguised as entertainment? The production team was in chaos now, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. This was television gold, but it was also a complete disaster. Several audience members were actually cheering for Shatner now, having turned completely against their host. "I've been on every major talk show in America," Shatner continued, his voice carrying the full weight of his decades in the spotlight. "From Ed Sullivan to Johnny Carson to David Letterman. Real professionals who understood that their job was to entertain their audience, not to humiliate their guests for cheap laughs." Kimmel tried to interrupt, but Shatner wasn't finished. "Those men had class, Jimmy. They had integrity. They understood that when someone comes on their show, they're a guest in their house, and you treat guests with respect. But you're just a bully with a television show." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was a legendary performer defending not just himself, but the entire concept of professional courtesy and basic human decency. "And you know what the really pathetic part is?" Shatner continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, which somehow made it even more powerful. "You think this makes you look good. You think your audience is going to admire you for this, but look around, Jimmy. Look at their faces." Kimmel did look, and what he saw clearly shook him. The audience wasn't laughing with him anymore. They weren't enjoying the spectacle. They looked uncomfortable, embarrassed, and many of them were openly hostile toward him now. "This is what passes for comedy in your world?" Shatner asked. "Cruelty disguised as entertainment? Making an old man dance for your amusement while you throw stones at him?" The host's face had gone pale now, the reality of what he'd unleashed finally sinking in. This wasn't the easy target he'd expected. This was William Shatner, a man who had faced down Klingons and critics alike for 6 decades. And he wasn't going down without a fight. "You want to know the truth about William Shatner?" the actor said, his voice building to a crescendo. "The truth is that I've worked harder, cared more, and given more of myself to this business than most people could even imagine. And if that's made me demanding sometimes, if that's made me difficult to work with occasionally, then so be it." Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Shatner held up a hand that brooked no interruption. "But I have never, ever stooped to the level of what you've done here tonight. I have never invited someone into my home just to humiliate them. I have never built my career on the destruction of others. And I never will." The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. This had gone far beyond entertainment now. This was a reckoning. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, with 250 audience members and millions of viewers at home holding their collective breath. Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his usual arsenal of quips and comebacks, completely depleted in the face of Shatner's devastating verbal assault. "You know what the saddest part of all this is, Jimmy," Shatner said, his voice now carrying a note of genuine pity that was somehow more cutting than his anger had been. "You actually had a chance here tonight to do something worthwhile. You had William Shatner sitting right here, ready to talk about a lifetime of experiences, ready to share stories that could have inspired people, entertained them in the best possible way." Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "Bill, we can still do that. We can talk about your documentary. We can—" "No," Shatner cut him off with the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "No, we can't, because you've shown your true colors tonight, and they're not very pretty, are they? You've shown everyone in this room and everyone watching at home exactly what kind of person you really are." The actor began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and dignified despite the chaos of the moment. "You see, Jimmy, there's something you never learned in all your years behind this desk. Success isn't about tearing other people down. Real success, lasting success, comes from lifting people up, from creating something beautiful in the world instead of destroying it. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Bill, come on, don't leave like this. Let's just, let's start over. Clean slate." Shatner paused in removing his microphone and looked directly at his host with an expression that mixed disappointment with something approaching contempt. "Start over? You think this is some kind of game where you can just reset when things don't go your way? This is real life, Jimmy. These are real people you're talking about, real careers, real lives that you're so casually trying to destroy for your entertainment." The legendary actor stood up fully now, his imposing presence filling the stage. Even at 83, William Shatner commanded attention like few people on Earth, and every person in that studio felt the full force of his personality bearing down on them. "I want you to think about something," Shatner said, his voice carrying clearly through the absolute silence of the studio. "I want you to think about what you're going to tell people when they ask you about tonight. Are you going to tell them how you ambushed an old man? How you tried to destroy someone's reputation for ratings? How you turned your show into a platform for character assassination?" Kimmel's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, looking for all the world like a fish gasping for air. "Or maybe," Shatner continued, "you'll tell them how you learned something tonight. How you realized that real entertainment doesn't have to come at someone else's expense. How you discovered that being a good host means being a good human being." First, the actor handed his microphone to a nearby production assistant, who took it with trembling hands. The entire crew was transfixed by what they were witnessing, the complete dismantling of their host by a master of the craft. "You know, Jimmy, I've been thinking about legacy lately," Shatner said, straightening his jacket with the same care he might have used adjusting his Starfleet uniform. "What we leave behind, how we're remembered. I've been fortunate enough to create characters that have meant something to people, to be part of stories that have inspired generations." He gestured around the studio, taking in the cameras, the lights, the stunned faces staring back at him. "This could have been part of your legacy, too. This show, this platform you've been given, it could have been something special. Instead, you've chosen to use it as a weapon. That's a choice you'll have to live with." Shatner turned toward the audience then, and his demeanor shifted completely. The anger was gone, replaced by the warmth and charisma that had made him beloved by millions. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the studio audience directly, "I want to thank you for being here tonight. You came expecting to be entertained, and instead you've been subjected to this spectacle. You deserved better, and I apologize that your evening was ruined by someone's poor judgment." Several audience members began to applaud, and the sound grew until nearly the entire studio was giving Shatner a standing ovation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The guest was receiving the acclaim while the host sat humiliated at his own desk. As the applause continued, Shatner raised his hand for quiet. "I want you to remember something," he told them. "In a world that seems increasingly determined to tear people down, to find the worst in everyone, you have a choice. You can choose to be part of that destruction, or you can choose to build something better. Choose to build." With that, William Shatner turned and walked toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed his every step as he moved with the dignity of a man who had nothing left to prove and nothing to apologize for. Jimmy Kimmel finally found his voice as his guest reached the stairs. "Bill, wait. This doesn't have to end like this." Shatner paused but didn't turn around. "You're right, Jimmy. It didn't have to end like this. But you made your choices, and now we all have to live with the consequences." And with that, one of the most iconic figures in entertainment history disappeared into the wings, leaving behind a studio full of shell-shocked people and a host who finally understood that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Kimmel's stunned expression and the continuing applause from an audience that had just witnessed television history. though not the kind anyone had planned for. As the show finally cut to commercial, one thing was abundantly clear to everyone who had witnessed this confrontation. William Shatner had just reminded the world why legends become legends, and why some people are remembered long after others are forgotten. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Have you ever seen anything like this on late night television before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that will leave you speechless.